Well, just a few days ago, we saw the news break that there's been a delay in the Misinformation Disinformation Bill. And don't worry, that news is not misinformation, it's actually true. The Labor government has said that they're pushing this legislation back into next year. And as soon as I saw that news, I instantly thought of one particular man. Why did I think of this man? Well, because he was one of the first and fastest to come out of the blocks and condemn the Misinformation Disinformation Bill when it was first proposed. The man I'm talking about is none other than Craig Kelly, National Director of the United Australia Party. Craig, thank you so much for coming on.
No, great to be with you, Topher.
Craig, there must be a certain sense of satisfaction seeing it sort of come to this, but I don't want to read too much into it. This is only a delay at this point. What do you think is happening here?
Yeah, look, let's not get overexcited about this. Yes, it's a small win, but a very, very small win. There was so much opposition to this, the government couldn't have pushed it through just and ignored the opposition. So what they've done, they thought, we'll just delay it a little bit. We'll give a little concession here that'll be pretty meaningless. And we'll bring it back next year, hoping that a lot of people will be asleep. Well, I just hope that this has the opportunity for more and more people to be awake of what an absolute heinous piece of legislation this is. I think this is the most dangerous piece of legislation that has ever been introduced into our federal parliament.
Well, I just finished rereading 1984. I just thought I'd better bring myself up to speed on current events. And so I reread 1984, and it certainly feels like a documentary for our time. I cast my mind back 10 years, and Craig, I know you've been in politics for a long time, even longer than this, but I think back to the proposed News Media Council. This was proposed under Prime Minister Julia Gillard in response to the Finkelstein report. She was wanting to have this, essentially, this Ministry of Truth. We defeated that back then. 10 years later, Sorry?
That's correct. Remember they said Stephen Conroy was all behind that. He said if he ordered you to wear a pair of underpants on your head, they'd have to do it, telling the media.
So what is it about government that seems to want this so badly that they'll bring it back every 10 years?
Look, I just think this latest one appears to be more of a globalist push. If you look around the world, almost every democratic country has some form of crackdown on free speech, all under different names. That's simply what it is. It's to cut down on dissent. Now, we saw actually during the COVID period how dangerous this censorship of Facebook and YouTube and the old Twitter pre-Elon Musk days were. They were censoring medical doctors who got the facts right. And because of that censorship, people died. And the errors that were being made, this is why you must have free speech, because it enables you to correct the errors and mistakes that are being made. Now, we had a lot of catastrophic areas during the COVID period that the delay in fixing them up and reversing track was because of that censorship on free speech.
Yeah.
And so this legislation takes us into the exact opposite direction to what we need to go, because it actually, in fact, gives the government power to work out what will be said and what won't be said online.
Now, your part of the UAP has a senator elected in Victoria, Ralph Babet. I'm a bit of a fan of his. I think he's doing a great job. He was very vocal, opposed to this legislation. To their credit, there were a handful of Liberal Party senators that have also been pushing back on this. But let's not forget, this was originally Liberal Party legislation, was it not?
That's absolutely right. The Liberals were very Johnny-come-latelys to this. It's only when they saw several of us in the minor parties really jump up and down on this. I remember when it first came out, the Liberal minister said, he had some concerns, You should have read it in about the first 30 seconds and gone, this is rubbish. I'm going to die in a ditch to oppose this. That's where you should have been, instead of just had some concerns about it. But where this actually goes back to, if you remember during the COVID period, we found this out from Freedom of Information requests. We had the Department of Health in this country spying on as an elected member of parliament, spying on my social media posts and sending off demands to Twitter that I be suspended from that platform. Right? A clear breach of parliamentary privilege, a breach, misfeasance, malfeasance, the whole lot, to try and interfere with the communications of an elected member of parliament. Yeah. That's what the Department of Health was doing. And here's the thing, Twitter came back because I was very careful what I posted, so I needed to have my Twitter, my only access really I had, because I'd been cancelled on Facebook. Twitter wrote back to the Department of Health and said, no, he hasn't broken any of our rules. We are not going to censor him. Now, but if that new legislation, if that misinformation, disinformation legislation had gone through, well, the Department of Health would have been able to write out, we don't care what your rules are. We are telling you that you need to censor him, right? Because we are writing the rules and we have deemed what he has said as misinformation. And if you don't censor him, you have a free choice to censor him or not. But if you don't, it'll be a $100 million fine.
Yeah.
So it's strengthening the powers that they didn't have before. And that was done under a Liberal government.
Yeah.
A Liberal government did that. They were trying to censor an elected member of Parliament debating issues that were highly contestable at the time. The efficacy of masks, the efficacy of the vaccines, the efficacy of the lockdowns, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, all of those things were highly contestable arguments. And there was some of the most highly qualified medical experts. There was peer-reviewed science, all on the side of what I was arguing for, and yet they wanted it censored.
It's an extraordinary chapter of history that we've come through, and there's a lot of people that when they see something like the Misinformation Disinformation Bill, they throw their hands up in the air and they say, "Oh, well, the fix is in. Of course, it's going to, of course, it's going to get in." We saw the same thing with The Voice. A lot of people saying, "Oh, the fix is in. The UN wouldn't allow it to fail." A lot of people talk about politics. Selected, not elected. What's the point? What's the point of getting excited? What's the point of supporting the UAP or minor parties or anything like that? It's all a waste of time. I think you're living proof, and the UAP is living proof that that's not the case. But in this case here, specifically on this piece of legislation, what does it say about engagement and people getting loud and getting involved that they've now had to delay this in response?
Well, people can make a difference, and don't forget, during the COVID period, people say, "Oh, you didn't make any difference." Remember, Greg Hunt and Morrison had bought 10 vaccines. They'd bought 260 million doses of the vaccine, 10 for every man, woman, and child, 10 shots each for every man, woman, and child in the country. They had vaccine passports and certificates in place that were meant to go through for all those 10 shots. Now, the only reason they dropped those vaccine passports, and we would still have them in today if it wasn't for, we just had enough people out there protesting on the streets and raising their voice and pointing out that these were a breach of human rights, that we were able to stop the government in their tracks. The same you said with The Voice. People were saying, "Oh, it's all rigged. Don't bother voting." Well, that was controlled opposition, telling people not to vote. And anyhow, it's shown it was a result. 60-something percent of the people voted no. Yep. That's what the poll showed. That's what the AEC came up with. I'm the last person in the world in this country to defend the AEC. But we had the vote, right? We had the vote. And it shows that you can make a difference. You can move the dial if you get out there and you argue and you fight on these issues.
Well, Craig Kelly, you're certainly no stranger to getting out there arguing and fighting on all of these issues that matter. We thank you so much for your time here on the Aussie Wire. Go well. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Topher. Great to be with you as always.